Hi everyone, welcome today. Thank you for Linden's Department of Parks and Recreation today for allowing us to deliver this program with you. If you would like more information about their programs in your community, please call 908-474-8600. My name is Michelle Hediger and I'm with Aristacare Health Services. Our facility in Linden is the Delaire community, which is right in your backyard. Today we're going to be talking about sensory loss and falls. As you age, or even if you're even a younger adult, you may come up with issues due to normal aging or maybe due to disease process, which cause you to have issues with some of your sensory systems. Those most common things are taste, smell, hearing, vision, and all those things that you do in your daily life that make you possible to be able to function. So today we're going to talk about how the loss of smell, taste, hearing, and touch can impact your risk for falls in your daily life. And we're going to discuss some practical solutions for problem areas related to sensory loss. We're also going to talk a little bit further about how the skills of an occupational or physical therapist may assist you in identifying the problem areas you may have and give you recommendations based on your needs. I am an occupational therapist by background, so I've worked a lot with older adults specifically in addressing these issues in their homes and through the rehab process. Sensory loss and falls management relate to your diminished or loss of your smell, your taste, your vision, your hearing, and even your touch. We don't realize how much our touch impacts our daily function and our quality of life. With normal aging process, oftentimes those are affected and can really increase your risk of falls. So it's not just your balance or ability to walk that could potentially cause your risk of falling. It plays a larger role in how we interact daily with our environment. Let's talk a little bit about smell and taste. Oftentimes people think, well, how does smell and taste affect it? Those always impact your ability to enjoy food. Obviously, you know, your favorite meals or things that if you're going out to dinner in restaurants, how they taste. Also, most of the time we also socialize around food. Food-related activities keep us healthy, they keep us engaged, and they impact our lives. Oftentimes, smell and taste can be affected by a disease process or medications that you may commonly found. Most recently, during the pandemic with COVID, a lot of people who have experienced COVID have a loss of taste of smell as well, and that may last longer than the initial disease process. But most importantly, lots of medications as we get older can also impact those areas. If it's diminished, we may no longer be able to enjoy the things we do and participate with food-related activities. That can cause both isolation and also then lead to our risk of falls. The less we're out and doing things or interacting in our environment or unfamiliar environments, the more risk we're going to be at falls. If your smell and taste are altered, we may be able to even discern when food becomes spoiled. So we may not be able to tell anymore if that milk is bad because we can't smell it. Do you ever do the smell test when you go to your refrigerator? My husband always says the date doesn't matter. You have to smell it to be able to tell if it's gone bad. So you smell it. It might not work because your sense of smell has been diminished and you may think something is okay. So if your taste is altered, you may start using more things like sugar and salt. We find in older adults that oftentimes they tend to add more extra salt or extra sugar to their items because they have started to have a decreased sense of taste in their taste buds. They also may eat more fattier foods because those tend to have more flavor, and that also can have negative effects on your health. With your smell, if you have a decreased sense of smell and it's altered, it's going to be very difficult for you to smell burning toast or like a fire on your stove or leaking gas. So those, once you're not going to have a little harder time in being able to identify hazards in your home. And being able to get that smell of something burning in your oven. I have a very poor threshold for smell. My husband's always the one that tells me when I'm burning things, or my daughter, she'll tell me you're burning the brownies. I'm like, what are you talking about? It just smells like chocolate. So I know that I'm the person who's not going to be the one that's going to be able to do that smell test. So as we age, we start getting a decrease in our ability to smell very quickly. And when that happens, then if something's burning in the oven, or if burning in the toaster, you may catch it, but it may take a little bit longer time, which will decrease your reaction time, and then it cause you to be able to run to get to it, which then could increase your risk of falls and potential injury, and God forbid, a fire in your home. Vision is very important. As we age, we tend to have more common conditions. The development of cataracts, which ends up being like a clouding of the eye, so things are not as distinct. Things are more less visible to us in our visual field. Macular degeneration. That's when you start having difficulty with your central field vision, and you start getting that very center, which you rely on heavily for the things you do in your daily life, to be able to do that. It may not affect your ability to recognize familiar persons walking towards you, or objects in your path. Diabetic retinopathy, another common condition as we age. It can vary the ability to be able to see well from the time of day. It can also be altered by even your food intake. Blurry vision is very common with diabetic retinopathy, which then it results in the potential for your falling. Also, normal changes to your vision. As we get older, our peripheral vision, which is the things we see on the side, those can definitely be impacted as we start getting a narrowing or a shortening of that field. So right now I can kind of see the side of the room all the way over there, but as I get older, I may slowly not be able to see that, and I might only be able to see kind of where my hand is. So that peripheral vision starts shortening. Sometimes with other conditions, you can actually lose sight in that visual field. That can result in your inability to be able to identify unsafe situations or hazards in your path. Oftentimes, think about driving. As we drive, we can catch something as it's coming in our path. Maybe it's a person walking across the street. Maybe it's another car coming into what we consider our blind spot. Those blind spots become more greater, and also we need to turn our head more to be able to see that. Unfortunately, as we age, we also start becoming a little stiffer because we're not doing as much, or maybe we have arthritis, and that affects our ability to be able to turn our neck. And so as we stop turning our neck more, and as our vision field changes, that impact of vision can really significantly increase your risk of falls or injury. One of the most common things, especially with vision, is the ability to see things in your path. One of the ways that these sensory systems work together is they help each other out. So if we start having visual changes, such as the inability to read signs to identify hazards or situations, the inability to track or scan the environment that we're in. So as the curb changes, we start losing potentially depth perception in some of the common medical conditions related to vision, but then also with normal aging. So the surfaces start to change. The great example of that is sidewalks. As we're walking down a sidewalk, sometimes you may have just a slight grade of difference between the two portions of the sidewalk. How often have you tripped on something like that? Your ability to be able to notice that the depth changes just so slightly is very important for your ability to decrease your risk of falls. Other things relate to your running into objects or tripping or falling. I love to give the example, and oftentimes I've seen it for people that come for short-term rehabilitation that have had a fall and it has resulted in a fracture. Oftentimes when we ask what happened, some of the common answers we get are, I tripped over my pet. I tripped over, Buddy. And I'm like, who's Buddy? Buddy's my dog. Well, as we get older, because we continue to have diminished sensory systems, things like this can happen. So Buddy the dog, or Penny your cat, they often are by your side all the time in your house. As you get older and you start having hearing loss, you may not hear them walking beside you. Your reflexes are starting to change too. So with your reflexes changes, then Buddy the dog comes walking beside you, you didn't hear him coming, and you're walking, you are not quick enough to react, and oftentimes then fall. So one of the common ways of being able to help you, if you have pets at home, we recommend, is just putting a little bell on their collar. Something that they can't eat, you know, so you want to make sure that it's like not on a harness or those type of things, but you want to put it on their collar. A simple little cat bell put on your pet, or specifically your dog or your cat, you're going to have a better chance of hearing that bell than potentially hearing them walking. If your hearing is so diminished, then that's going to be a problem. So if you know that your pet walks commonly near you, you're going to need to turn your head and scan often when you're walking, especially if you're walking on uneven surfaces, or even if you're going to walk fast through your home, maybe to get something out of the refrigerator, maybe to get the doorbell when it's ringing. You want to be able to make sure that you're completely scanning and turning your head through that environment. Make sure that you're looking down as well. Other ways that your vision impacts what you do is your awareness of approaching objects, like I talked about with your dog or your cat. It increases your startle response. When we're startled and we walk, all of a sudden the phone rings and it's your daughter calling. You want to get it because you know after 4 rings, it's going to go to voicemail. You hear that ring as you're doing your normal activity. Maybe you're just, you know, walking throughout your home. You hear that ring, you get an initial startle response. You go to quickly be able to answer the phone. When you do that, you also have to be very wary of your vision, because that startle response and your ability to be able to just scan the whole area before you get to that phone, which might be in the other room, can be greatly impacted. Other things are fast-moving objects, like with cars. So if you walk throughout your community, or even if you are driving, you want to make sure that you're aware of that startle response. Anxiety in crowded areas can also impact, and they may increase your risk of falls as well. One of the common things is your ability to identify familiar persons and places. If you're having some vision changes through macular degeneration, through glaucoma, through cataracts, or diabetic retinopathy, you may have some impacts of being able to identify familiar people and places. So oftentimes when you're already nervous about going into unfamiliar settings, and if you don't recognize familiar people, that can also impact. Your reactions then can be more heightened, and that can create that startle response, leading to falls. As we talked about earlier with that sense of hearing, and I gave you the example of your pet, some of the other things that impact your risk of falls with hearing can be due to your age or occupational recreational noise. Maybe you worked for years in a factory, and that has diminished your ability to be able to hear. Years ago, meaning a while back, even my father is a great example. He worked for years in a factory. They did not wear and get regular hearing tests when he was working in his 20s and 30s, and even his 40s. Now, he just retired this past year, they were doing mandated hearing tests and wearing hearing protection. So those kind of things can impact it. Genetics can impact your hearing loss. Oftentimes, you may have if you have a family member that had early hearing loss, you may be more impacted for hearing loss. Vascular disease, infections, medications, also increased wax production. Oftentimes, as you get older, for whatever reason, we increase our wax production in our ears. That can greatly impact your ability to be able to hear. Where you would hear that snap of something, it starts to diminish because of the basically like a clogging of the wax inside your ear. If you think of a wax candle or something like that, it's a very thick, so that sound has to go through that into the ear canal. So it's really important that you see regularly an audiologist. If you're over the age of 65, I recommend that you at least see somebody once just to have a regular screening. Also through your family physician or your internal medicine doctor, they can do a screening, and they're oftentimes for hearing. Looking inside the ear on a regular physical is critical. As we're adults, oftentimes we don't have the typical childhood ear infections where someone's looking in our ears, but through a regular full exam on a yearly basis with your family physician, they'll look in your ears and identify if you have increased ear wax production or if you have any infections or anything else in your ear. As I talked about, sometimes with hearing, some of the things that we think it's not as important, but we may miss instructions. So instructions from your physician as far as the correct intake for medication. Instructions that someone gives you for directions or those types of things. Most importantly, as I discussed, it's that ability to be able to hear and discern oncoming hazards that really can impact us, that result in that quick startle, that sudden turn, and then subsequently a fall response. As I mentioned, sense of touch is another key area. Sense of touch affects how we interact with the world and the environment. Think about our ability, we do a lot of things. We reach into our drawers, we reach into even, if you're in your car and you reach into your glove compartment, we know what something feels like. I go into my drawer to get my junk drawer in my kitchen. Everybody has a junk drawer, right? I reach in to grab this pen and I know the feel of the pen. I'm going to grab that pen over a pair of scissors because I have a sense of feel. I don't necessarily always need to look inside there. But oftentimes, that sense of touch starts to diminish. So as that happens, and that can be just through general skin changes, that also can be due to other types of medical conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome, or even diabetes, which often affects older adults. So the ability to be able to discern that sensation and identify that can be impacted. It also impacts our ability to grip or grasp things. We do so many things with our hands, holding onto a walker or a cane, and being able to use those type of assistive devices requires heavily on that sense of touch and the ability to be able to grasp. Oftentimes, we have arthritic changes in our hands, and then coupled by some of the changes in sensation, whether it's a long-term carpal tunnel affecting your nerves, or whether it is diabetes, that ability to be able to hold on. Diabetes also impacts the sensation in our feet. That causes a lack of those protective responses I just spoke about that also increase our fall risk. So with diabetic, if you are diabetic, it is very critical that you see your physician regularly to determine if you need diabetic footwear. What diabetic footwear is going to do for you is it's going to provide you protection. It's going to provide you a stable walking surface, that you can then maneuver through your home. Oftentimes with diabetic individuals, you start losing that sensation in your feet. So if you're walking across your home, you may not realize that you're stepping on something. It could be something as small as a plastic bottle cap. We didn't look down and we stepped on it. Oftentimes, we don't feel if our feet get scratched very slightly or just a little tiny scrape or scratch that could happen. That could lead to then infection. With diabetic conditions, oftentimes the speed of healing is reduced. So then you can get an infection easily in your feet as well. So having something like diabetic footwear and seeing a podiatrist on a regular basis, making sure that your toenails are clipped and taken care of as well, can also help with increasing your safety. What's more important though is that all these things kind of interact together. So as we start seeing, you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, my hearing's okay. I don't need a hearing aid, but yeah, sometimes I don't quite hear as well as I used to. Or yes, my vision is starting to go poor. Maybe I don't go to the eye doctor as often as I should. Maybe I didn't follow up with that prescription the eye doctor gave me because I wasn't able to go out or I didn't have someone to take me to go get new eyeglasses. Those little types of activities can then lead to further problems. That can then lead to more of a multisensory decline. So it might be little changes that are impacting all of those systems at once that become pretty much a perfect storm for you to then have a risk of falls. So that decline in more than one sense will dramatically increase your ability to maintain that balance when you're walking, also to avoid falls in your environment. You have to rely on multiple senses. So if one sense goes, so if I blindfolded you today, what would you rely on? If I stood you in this room and I blindfolded you, I would tell you, you have to go sit in the chair. Well, how would I get there? Probably lost time with the loss of vision, we touch. So I'm going to reach and try to find things to get to that end, to get to that end spot. So I'm going to use that sense of touch. I'm also going to be maybe aware of what's going on in my environment. Do I hear someone walking close to me? And then I know I have to stop. So I'm using that sense of hearing. Each one of those are going to be working extra hard if one of your senses is diminished. So think about that often. If our sense of smell is diminished, so I might not be able to smell when there is a fire in my home, I can rely potentially on the sound of that fire alarm. That fire alarm is going to go off and I'm going to be able to hear it. So that's another reason why you got to change those batteries regularly. Oftentimes we're not really good of changing those batteries in our fire alarms, but that's going to let us know. When, God forbid, something happens, like a fire in a home, if it's in the middle of the night and people are sleeping, they rely heavily on those fire alarms. Well, why? Because they're sleeping. They're not seeing it. They're not smelling it, the smoke. So we rely on those alternate senses to be able to help us when we need to do that. So if your hearing is diminished, or if we've removed our hearing aids, is a great example, we may not be aware of that fire alarm. So it's really important to make sure that if you have hearing aids or those type of things, you want to wear those, especially because you may have that risk. Another example of losing more than one sense that I can give you is that if you're losing your vision and you lose the ability to discern or identify the differences between facial features, you oftentimes then would be lip reading. So if someone has to lip read but then has a hearing loss because they have to lip read, if they have a vision loss up top of that, it's going to be very difficult. So a great example of that recently is for a lot of us, we didn't realize how much we relied on our vision when talking with other individuals. I think anyone of any age could say that they probably read people's lips as much as they listened to people when they were talking and didn't realize it until we had to apply our mask this past year. So with that, you lost that sense of vision to be able to read the lips, also to understand, just facial and body language. But that definitely impacted, especially if you have more of a significant hearing loss. Some of the other things that you have to think about is ways to be able to help you in your environment. So simple common things that you should be thinking of that both like physical and occupational therapy can do for you would be things related to falls recovery. I will tell you that oftentimes, most people don't want to hear this, but falls are inevitable. I can't tell you how many times I've probably fallen in this past year. I tripped. I slid down my steps when I was taking my dog out right when we had our first frost. I took a pretty big doozy just because my foot went from underneath me. As well as sometimes we're just in a hurry and we miss a step. We miss a step walking. Maybe we trip over something. It's common in every age of every individual. As we get older, though, our risk for falls does increase because of some of the sensory changes. So oftentimes, a physical and occupational therapist can help you to be able to identify how to safely fall, and then also how to recover from a fall. So recovering from falls is a little bit easier to understand. If I fell, like when I fell down the steps, I was pretty shocked. It was 4 steps. So I was at the top of the landing, I slid down, landed hard onto a walkway, and I was shocked. So the first thing to do when you fall is I assessed myself. Am I okay? I also had to take some deep breaths. It kind of knocked the wind out of me because I landed pretty hard. And I was surprised because I didn't think it was ice. It just happened to be that just nice, smooth, kind of coating on my wood steps. It was just enough. You couldn't visibly see it, but I slipped. I also had slippers on. So slippers are like the worst thing in the world to be wearing outside, but I was letting the dog out. So footwear is so important. They were nice and smooth. So things that are nice and smooth, you're obviously gonna tend to slip more with. I fell down. I needed that time to be able to catch my breath, kind of assess my situation of what was going on. So before you try to get up from something, you want to take that time to be able to kind of take a deep breath, assess, am I okay? Do I feel like I broke something? Am I able to move everything? If you are not, or if you feel that at any point that you feel that you can't get up, you should call for help. Oftentimes, that can be difficult. In my situation, I was in my backyard. The kitchen door was shut. The dog wasn't going to help me. So, what are you going to do? I could scream and hope that my husband heard me. But if I had my phone with me, I could call somebody for help. If I had a med alert bracelet, I could call for help. So if you do have either a cordless phone in your home, or maybe you have a cell phone, it's really beneficial to probably always have that in your pocket. Maybe you don't commonly have a pocket, or maybe your cell phone or your cordless phone doesn't fit in your pocket. Other things you can do, especially if you use like a walker or a cane, is to have a fanny pack. The fanny packs are so fashionable now, you'd be like fitting in. So whether it's a crossbody fanny pack or a fanny pack across your waist, having something to be able to put that in, especially if you're nervous that you wouldn't be able to reach somebody in a timely manner, just wearing that around your house is very good for you to be able to do. So I could call for help if I assess myself, calm myself down, and realize I'm either bleeding too much or something's wrong. I'm not going to be able to move one of my limbs. So I assess myself, I determine I'm okay. Don't need to call for help. I might be slightly embarrassed, but if I'm definitely okay and I don't need to call for help, I need to get up. So when you're laying either in the prone on your stomach, or whether you're lying face up, or whether you're crouched over, how do you get up from that position? A physical therapist can walk you through and teach you how to do fall recovery. If you're someone who falls often, that would be something very valuable to talk to your physician about. Don't be embarrassed about falls. Many people are embarrassed that they're falling. They think it's something wrong with them. That doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. It could be these multi-sensory changes that something can be identified that could help you out. It could be due to musculoskeletal. So some exercises and some balance training may be able to help you out. If you don't speak about it to your physician, to a family member, no one's going to recommend you to have those services. But when you do fall, there's a safe way of being able to sit up and get up. Oftentimes you need to roll over to your side, get yourself to a kneeling position. The kneeling position is your best position to be able to get up in if you can. And then you're going to use both of your arms to be able to get yourself up. If you're close to a surface, whether it's a step, whether it's a chair or a couch, you want to be able to kind of crawl over to that position, get yourself to that stable surface, put your arms on there from a kneeling position and be able to stand yourself up. That way you have another support system, then you can sit down and be able to relax in. So a physical or occupational therapist can help you to teach you how to do that by having a mat down on the floor. Practice falling. Yes, we practice falling. It sounds odd, but it's good to practice falling. And then being able to stand up. Once you get into the seat, hopefully you have a drink of water nearby. You can then relax and decrease your anxiety, which is probably causing you to be even more nervous. So learning those falls management and recovery techniques are very critical as you get older, and especially with sensory loss. As I mentioned earlier with walking, turning your head and scanning, keeping your range of motion in your neck, in your shoulders, in your knees, in your hips, throughout your body is very important. Oftentimes, people do things like yoga or gentle stretching. There's simple stretches you can do in your daily environment that help not only improve potentially your posture, but also your flexibility. Flexibility is key because when you do trip or when you try to catch yourself, if you're not flexible, you're going to be more prone to falling and ending up on the floor. Also, just that flexibility and being able to turn your head and identify things is really critical with your vision loss. Learning how to adapt your environment. So that, as I mentioned with your pets, you know that you don't always hear or you're not quick enough to catch when Fluffy or whoever comes in your way, then we want to put a belt on Fluffy. Just simple things like that can improve it. If it's at nighttime, oftentimes, you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. People can fall during that because they get out of bed. It's a dark environment. All of a sudden I have to, go to the bathroom. I get up and then I didn't realize maybe there's something on the floor. Maybe it was a piece of paper that, fell out of a notebook that I was writing in at bedtime. Maybe it's a wrapper. I was having a snack while I was sleeping. Who knows? Anything like that may happen is in your way. You wake up, it's dark, you don't see it, you slip and fall on it, or you trip on it. So keeping your space clean. I've collected so many things in, my 45 plus years. I can't imagine as I get older having to part with a lot of those things. But keeping spaces clean, having less is more when it comes to your environment. So making sure that things are not on the floor, things are picked up regularly, just a simple thing of having a reacher. A reacher is like a little gun kind of gadget. Should have brought one with me today that has like a little grasper thing at the end. You sometimes see people on the roadside that do the cleaning using those to pick up trash. That can be great because if you're worried about reaching down or you don't have the ability to reach down and pick up that wrapper or something on the floor, you can just use that to reach down, pick it up, and then throw it away. You take it out, you throw it away, you toss it. So keeping your environment clean, free of obstructions or things in the way, obstacles, is really key. Making sure that if you have your bed, that you have a bedside table there that's far enough back that if you have issues with getting up, you can roll, you can sit up, but you can turn on a light before you walk into the bathroom. Or potentially night lights, if you think about it. Maybe you haven't needed a night light for a very long time. But that night light is something great to get. They're very inexpensive. You can even get them at the dollar store or the Dollar Tree. And you might want to plug them into the walls along the way to your destination. You can have them so that you can get fancy ones that are motion sensor detected. But the only problem with those is that you're going to have to get closer in the path before you can see those. So just a simple nightlight that you can turn on at nighttime that leads you to the path that you're getting to. Maybe you're a nighttime snacker and oftentimes you go to bed, you wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and you're starving and want a glass of milk. Making sure that you have those nightlights on the way to the kitchen is a great way to do it. Making sure that if you have light fixtures along the way, that they're working so that your light bulbs are in those. Daylight bulbs are the best for you. Nowadays, there's so many different types of light bulbs, but if you go to any hardware store, they're willing to help you with those different kinds. A longer energy lasting daylight savings bulb will last you for years. You won't have to change it. I know for myself, oftentimes if things are higher, and I don't want to change that light bulb, if it goes out, it might be a month before I say to my husband or someone, can you change it for me? So having something that's a little bit longer lasting, those lights are able to turn on that are bright in those surfaces, really can make a difference. And they're just simple little things you can do in your daily life. So who else can help? As I mentioned, physical and occupational therapy can certainly help you with the strengthening, the flexibility. They can help you even in your home through your Medicare Part B services. They can actually help you in your home to be able to help you out with identifying obstacles, talking about a plan to be able to get up from the floor, how to fall in a safer manner. If you're starting to lose your balance, how do I lower myself to the floor safely? That can be really key. There is a safe way to lower yourself to the floor to decrease your risk of falls. But the other things you can do is to see your doctor about those sensory losses. As we talked about, what was the last time you went to the eye doctor? When's the last time you had your hearing checked? Do you regularly check your blood sugars to see if you're at risk for diabetes, which definitely affects all those senses. Those are common things you need to have those open conversations with your physician. Awareness will dramatically increase any type of problem to become a solution. One of the key things is the ability to really be safe in your home. Your home is your castle. This past year, we spent a lot more times in our homes than we have in the past or in our backyards. So making sure that those meet our sensory needs on a daily basis is critical. So finding other resources in your community. If you have vision changes and you need help, your local Lions Club has always been very vigilant in helping community with their vision losses. Simple resources in your community can help you out significantly. So I hope this was helpful to be able to just start to understand the things that may be occurring with subtle changes in your sensory loss. Also, just awareness of that these can be impacting you today or they can impact you tomorrow. But being proactive and being sure that you talk with your physician, your family members, reaching out to rehabilitation therapists through occupational and physical therapy can all enhance your ability to be independent, have a high quality life, reduce your risk for falls, because we don't want to fracture anything at any age, but certainly as we get older, we don't want to be able to fall. But if you do, don't be ashamed, because falls happen, but how can we protect ourselves? So thank you very much. Again, I'm Michelle Hediger with Aristacare Health Services. Feel free to check us out at Aristacare at Delaire, which is right in your backyard in Linden. Thank you very much to Linden Departments of Recreation and Parks for allowing us to come today. Thank you.